I'm really excited to talk to Adriana Ennab today. Adriana, we've wanted to do this for a long time. I'm so excited to finally have you on. She can tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so sorry it's taken so long with this crazy summer in the last few months. Um, so I work at Credit Suisse right now as a public policy director, covering all digital topics and tax and securitization. Basically, what we do is we're the interface between the bank and the regulators, the global standard setters, the government, looking at regulations and implementations. I've been very lucky to deal on the digital topics because that's a little different from some of the markets issues that appear like MiFID and EMIR. We're building this from scratch with the regulators. We're developing it together, so it's incredibly interesting to be working hand in hand and looking at what the future looks like. And I think it's almost more interesting. I wasn't there, but than the Industrial Revolution. What we're living through now and the changes that are happening and the possibilities are fantastic. So it's very exciting.
So, Adriana, could you give us a tiny bit more information about that? Because what will the future look like?
Very innovation friendly, very technological, but it's something that's been happening little by little. And I think people are very afraid of it. So, looking at generative AI or AI in general, blockchain, which I think is a game changer, which is how I sort of really got into working more on digital. When I started in this role, which we can talk about later, I was out of banking for 16 years and I came through a returnship. And I was asked to sit in this department, to work in this department. And I said, absolutely not. I don't know anything about policy. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't around when there were any regulations. When I left in 1998, there were no regulations. They said they wanted someone who understood the markets because there were so many post-financial crisis market regulations. I said, okay, I'll give it a go. If they said, if you don't like it after 3 months, we'll find you something else. That was almost 10 years ago. And I looked at one of the consultations from one of our regulators in the EU, which mentioned blockchain. And at that point, the only thing I knew about blockchain was Bitcoin. And I thought, well, why are they talking about it when they're securities regulators? So securities talking about, fixed income or equities or anything like that. And then I realized how this could change the entire market, how it could make it more efficient, streamlined, more effective, cheaper, how the financial crisis would not have had been such a hard hit crisis had we been using the blockchain for securities transactions. And this is something that in the role that I'm doing now, I'm working really closely with regulators and with other industry professionals and trade associations to push through. So the future looks, I don't believe that this means that there won't be jobs for people. I think that jobs will change and that people need to learn. So I suggest as often as I can to younger generation or people that are out of work or people that are thinking about a new career or women returning to work, whatever you do, take a course on technology, on AI, even if, they say that coding will be done by AI and you won't be needed as a coder, but you really need to understand the ecosystem to move forward. And I think there are so many opportunities and it's so fascinating. Digital identities where you can basically, and then you can transfer data from one place to the other, where we own our own data, self-sovereign data, and then you can do with that what you want. You almost have like a little pod of information of who you are. So if you move, as you know, you go to Australia and you want to move medical records, that's an absolute nightmare and you have to get physical ones. If you want to open up a bank account in a different country, it's incredibly difficult. Why is that? If you already have that information with that bank, why is it difficult to cross border? So making life more efficient and that information easier to access.
Adriana, how exciting does that sound?
So exciting,
Adriana,
so
you've been
thrilling.
talking about it. You've been a mom, you were out of business for 16 years. Tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I'll try and make it quick because it could be a very long one, but I started when I was a freshman in university. I wanted to work in the summer and I started working at J. Aron, which was then merged with Goldman Sachs, and I loved it. So I decided to stay on full time there, but also go into university full time. When Goldman actually merged with J. Aron, they asked me to come in and work normal hours as opposed to after, and I said, okay, fine. and they paid for my undergraduate and my MBA. And I basically worked since I was 18 all the way through until 16, well, 16 plus 9 years ago when I left. One of the things that I always tell, I do a lot of talks for women returning or girls in university, or and that are interested in finance, or ones that aren't interested in finance, that are in different areas, because we hire from all sorts of areas. And the one thing I tell them is that it is not a linear path. So I see a lot of this generation, this is my idea, this is where I want to go, this is where I'm headed, and I have to go in this direction. So I had set up a repo desk for a bank in London, and I wanted to move, and I left that bank. I wasn't happy working there, and that's the other thing is, you need to make those decisions for you. And if something isn't working for you, then you need to make a choice, as opposed to just staying with it and saying that the cards are stacked against you. You need to take responsibility for your actions. So I left, and I wanted to move to the UK as an expat, and that wasn't happening with an investment bank at that time in the 1980s. So I was offered a job as a broker to set up a broking desk in London on repo. And at that point, that was like going from being prime minister to being a used car salesman, to go from Goldman to a broker. But I had to make the decision, what was more important for me? And at that point, I wanted to be in London more than I wanted to be in investment banking. And I thought, once I get there, I'll see what I do. So I got there, I set up the desk, I loved it. It was a great environment. I learned a lot from that experience, because I actually set up a desk from scratch in a different country. And then a year later, I went and I moved over to Merrill Lynch as a trader, and then as global product manager. So that path is not linear, and you have to take the opportunities when they come. And you have to see, there is always something to learn from the different roles that you take. And sometimes you take a step backwards in order to take 5 forward. So I would never change any of the things that I'd done. And then I ended up in Asia, because I set up a lot of time with the central banks, helping them with their repo markets. And again, then at that time with my husband, his company said only Japan. My company said only Hong Kong. I went to talk to our guys in Japan, moved there. 3 weeks out of every month I was traveling. But that was worth it for me to make that move. And I absolutely loved it. And I had my first child at the time. And it's that taking that risk, taking those opportunities, and then ended up with a 16-year gap. I was in Singapore for a while. I opened 2 bars, did an art degree at Christie's. I ran a business, set up a business for Richard Branson, and had another child, renovated a house. So, I've always liked to keep busy, but every single experience were not things that long term, would I want to be a bar owner? Absolutely not. But I learned that. And one of the things you learn by doing things is what you want to do as well, which I think is incredibly important. But one of the most important things for me is to learn something every day, to try new things, if it's possible, especially if you don't have the responsibility of supporting a family. When I was younger, I didn't. And just to understand that these opportunities come along. So then, like I said, 16 years out, but I was out for 11 trying to find a way back in. And the headhunting firm that was supposed to help women get back into work after being out for so long were not very helpful. They said, you need to use your contacts. And then Credit Suisse had this, they were the first to set up a return program, which I wrote to the guys in New York. They weren't in the UK yet, but I wrote to them and said, if you ever have it in the UK, let me know. They wrote back a month later and said, we're setting one up next year. Applied, got the job, took the risk. I said absolutely not to policy, because I didn't know anything about it, as I mentioned earlier. And I took that risk, and I said, and I was hyperventilating and sweating and nervous and couldn't sleep. It was like, what am I doing? How can I do this? But I've always found when you don't get something, it's generally because they know that you're not the right person for the job. And when you do, even though you don't believe in yourself, you just have to pick yourself up and say, what's the worst thing that can happen, and try. And like I said, that was almost 10 years ago, and I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it.
What a fascinating story. And thank you so much for telling it, because I think it's very important to get more women back into work after taking time off as mums, where we obviously don't all sit around and, we're busy doing things.
Our brain doesn't atrophy. And also, as I said, one of the things I first said is you've been dealing with terrorists for years. So you have a skill set that many people who've continued to work do not have.
I totally agree. Adriana, so what do you think is your main motivator going forwards?
I love what I do. I love the people that I meet. I love, like I said, every day I'm learning something new. The connections that I make, the ability to change and to help formulate this uh, innovation ecosystem and to work together with the regulators and as like I said at the beginning when I started with this, a lot of the other banks were a little bit reluctant to work so closely with the regulators and to work hand in hand with them. But I knew from the work I'd done previously that this, the supervisory side and this sort of innovation side, that they were completely separate. And it didn't mean that you couldn't, because everyone's so afraid of talking to the regulators. We could work together to build this together. And once there's that trust between the two, you can change things, and why not say, look, this is how it works in financial institutions. This doesn't work. This does work. And, it's a two-way conversation. And I absolutely love that. I speak at a lot of conferences. One of the things I enjoy most is through my experience is actually speaking at these events to, like I said, everything from university girls that are in uni that are not doing finance, to tell them you don't have to be in finance to do this, to and interns that we have, graduate students, to recruitment, to returners. I've just signed up, which my friends are like, are you insane? You don't have time to become a STEM ambassador. So going into schools and teaching girls, yeah, because I find, well, not just girls, actually kids, I find it a little bit disappointing because we worked post Brexit on the Khalifa review and what could we do to retain talent in the UK when so many people left to go back home, which is where the majority of people with this talent came from Europe, and we're not building it here. So I have 3 boys and they've gone to very good schools. And in primary and secondary school, they were not given computer science as a fundamental basic course. So one of the things I would love to do is to change it so that, it's great that the kids take language from 4 years old. And I think, I speak many languages, it's incredibly important, but they should be doing STEM. They should be doing some coding from when they're 4, to just little things like Minecraft. And the other thing that happens with that is not just do we build the future talent pool in the UK, but also for girls, it is then in their DNA. When that is something that you are brought up with, it's not a, can I go into technology? Is this for me? Am I going to be in a basement room with no windows? To be in tech is actually so much more favorable for women than anything else because you can do that on the road. You can do it anywhere. So, we hire a lot of girls into tech, but then the attrition rate, drops off. And I think that if this starts from a very young age, like I said, you can not only build a future talent pool, but you can also make this part of, girls' DNA. And one of the things I want to show them is that, I'm involved in innovation and I'm not a coder. So there are so many different things that you can do. The possibilities are endless and it's fascinating.
Yeah, and thank you, Adriana, for shaping the future because that's really what you do with policy work and all the work you do on the side with getting more kids into tech, etc., and
Yeah.
speaking at all the engagement. Adriana, what are you most proud of looking back?
Um, this is going to sound really cheesy, but my kids actually, because because I had so much. One thing I will say, just as a little learning thing, is that, and I've had a lot of girls ask me this, role models and all this kind of thing, and judgment. No matter what you do, you will be judged. When I was working, I was judged because I wasn't around for my kids. When I wasn't working, I was judged by women that did work and I wasn't working. So no matter what you do, you will be judged. So do what's right for you. I think real equality is that you do what works for you. And if that means you want to stay home, then you do that. If that means you want to be a dog walker or whatever else, then you do that. If you want to work, you do that. And so finding that balance of what made me happy, which is working, which always made me happy, and then being able to raise children that respected women, respected me, respected themselves, and went on to have their own successful careers, I think, and having still being close to them, not losing that, even though I decided to work. Even though I took that time out, but still the kids were a little older. I think that's incredibly important. I think I'm super proud also of whenever I speak at these things, how many girls, women, returners will come to me and say, "You've changed my life. You've given me, the inspiration to do something different." I have people at work asking me if their daughters can come in and speak to me, and to be able to, I am so honored that, my journey, and a lot of people ask me why I spend a lot of my free time doing this, is because I think I have a responsibility to pay that forward. I know I've worked hard, but I've been lucky, and the people that I've met, and I think that, if I can, there are very few people that have the ability to say, I started in New York in the 80s when I was 17 years old. I went to Japan. I married, divorced, children, moved around, went into a new role, left banking, set up bars, did all of this. I need to share that. I need to share that so that people can know it is absolutely possible. If that's what you want, then you need to focus and start reading and start going onto webinars and start getting online and just start digging and digging and digging and building that future. It doesn't just happen. You need to build it.
Adriana, you've given so many amazing tips, and I really want to thank you for this incredible work you do, because it's very powerful and it's very important.
Thank you.
What other tips would you have? What top tips would you have to the younger generation that are finishing school, thinking about their future, maybe want to go into fintech or into finance? What tips would you have for them?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's incredibly important to read around it. So I set up, alerts on my phone from Google, this and the other, on to get on to set up your LinkedIn profile, to connect with, if you're just starting out, with your friends, your parents' friends, or people that you find interesting. Start reading things, start posting, some articles, read about it. Go to, now there's so many webinars where you can meet people. And then oftentimes I'll do that, and then I'll write to the person who is leading and say, that was really interesting. Can we have a conversation? So again, lead with that. Read as much as you can. Get involved in any activities that you can get involved in. Take courses if you need to build onto that, to learn about, like I said, AI, blockchain. Learn what these things are, even if it doesn't have to be, and you don't need to be, incredibly computer literate, but just an overarching, so you can be part of that conversation, because being part of that makes a big difference. And turn up for as many things as you can turn up. Get a mentor, get people that, and the other thing, and I think people will disagree with me, but they've asked me, what was it? How did I, when I didn't have a role model that looked like me? I don't think, if I'd waited for a role model that looked like me, I would have been waiting a long time. And I don't see why they have to look like me. I pick up different things from different people. There's, like, for instance, Steve Bartlett. There's things when I went in to speak and I listened to his interview with Bear Grylls, or, loads of different people. They don't look like me, but I pick up bits and pieces. And I think for a lot of people, if you're waiting for someone that looks like you're going to wait for a long time. And why do they have to? What is interesting about that person that you really, you value? And pick up lots, just read and read and read. And then, change, allow yourself to change, reevaluate what you believe. And, like I said, sometimes take opportunities, sometimes, as an internship, unpaid, or whatever it is, where you can learn something. If you're not, unless you have, don't be so set in doing a certain thing that you miss another opportunity.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Brilliant tips. So what is in store for you, Adriana? What is the future going to look like for you? What are your goals, your dreams, your aspirations? Are there any? I know that Credit Suisse has been bought by UBS. What does your future look like?
That we're still working through it, but I have to say, the when this first happened, I thought, gosh, I said, I went back to work relatively old after 16 years out, and rebuilt myself from absolutely, I was fixed income, I was capital markets, I knew nothing about policy, completely rebuilt my career. And I thought, to start again. And then sort of I had a couple of days of, which is normal, the whole imposter syndrome, which I will just say everyone has. So please, you must believe that. People can't believe, with all the things I've done, there are debilitating days where, we all have it. It is normal. And the only reason I like to say that is because I think that once other people have it, it doesn't make it easier for you to get up in the morning. Well, it does make it easier. It doesn't stop it from happening, but it makes it easier because you're not alone, and that you're not worthless, and it happens to everybody. I used to think I was going to be, was it Sally Fields used to call it bag lady syndrome. And I used to think, I have very nice, I'm going to be out on the street with very nice bags when they find out. Anyway, I had a couple of days of, complete sort of to rebuild myself again, to prove myself again to a new company, to new people, to, which I've already done where I am. And then after that, it's like, right, okay, I've allowed myself to mourn, to whimper for a couple of days and to just say, oh, I can't believe it. And I see it now as a challenge, and I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever happens, it will be. I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of new people. I have learned a lot about myself and my ability to, even after all this time, when I have rebuilt myself so many times, I didn't realize I could do it again. And it feels really good to have that in my arsenal that I can draw from in the future when sometimes things will be rubbish, which they are. So I don't know is the answer, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a great organization, and I think the people that I've met so far have been incredibly professional and fantastic, and so far wonderful.
Adriana, what an inspirational conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being persistent and for waiting and dealing with it.